I love these guys.
Well, welcome to episode 56 of the Secondhand Lions. This is John Drennan back home and kind of rested from vacation. And I'm here with my friend Bill Radford, Bill, last week we were together in our home doing the broadcast, and then you continued on. You're back in Nova Scotia. And speaking of travel, I went back and listened to last week, and clearly I had travel fatigue. A year ago, I was talking about how I want to clean up things. When I go back and listen, I have several cleanups from last week that probably irritated some of our listeners. So let me go back to that. First of all, I think I referred to Joe Burrow as Joe Burrows maybe 100 times. It's Burrow, I get it. Um, Secondly, I mentioned that Ahmed Hassanin went to Boise State. I knew when I said it that wasn't right. Um, I'm sorry, he went to Boise State. I said he went to Idaho State. And when I said that, I'm like, that doesn't feel right. He went to Boise State, the team with the blue field. Um, I said that I thought Skylar Gill Howard, the rookie sixth round pick, I thought he was Texas A&M. No, he was Texas Tech, but they're all kind of the same in my mind. Some of those good Texas teams. Then I referred to Keith Abney correctly at one time where I said he was a fifth round pick. Later, I said he was a fourth round pick. Well, he was a fifth round pick, but he was the Lions' fourth pick. And he was projected to go in the third or fourth rounds. We'll be talking more about him. Um, I mentioned Lucas, the undrafted free agent edge from USC. He did have one good play I remember from the Bengals game, but the guy I really meant to mention was O'Neal. He's the rookie from Rutgers, undrafted free agent. Bill, he's making some real noise at training camp, and he had a really good game against the Bengals. So we'll be talking more about him. Finally, in referencing the various players that played last week, I did mention Rock Ya-Sin. He didn't play, but I mentioned he played well. So he 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 stood on the sidelines well, but he was considered a starter, and I think the only player that played last week against the Bengals who right now is likely a starter was the rookie Blake Miller, and it makes sense that he played. And then finally, Bill, I did mention that Miles Frazier had a rough time and had three penalties. But here's something I didn't know, and I want to say this. He played every single offensive snap of the game, and he played three different positions, I believe, both right and left guard and left tackle. So I want to lighten up a little bit on my criticism because he's a second year guy that missed most of last year with injury, being asked to play three positions. Now, a non football person might hear that and go, well, what's the big deal? Left, right? The big deal is every position has different assignments. And let's say the difference between left guard and right guard, you got a different tackle next to you. Everything's different. And to ask a guy in his second year, in wet conditions, and I know they were all playing in the rain, but to play every single snap at multiple positions, that's a challenge. So kudos to
Yes, it
him.
is.
So
But
those are my,
he should be able to count no matter which position he's in.
and not go offside, you mean?
Right.
Well, he had a lot on his mind. I'm going to give him just a slight pass. I mean, three penalties, you can't have that. But I'm giving him a slight pass in that he played every single offensive snap. I think it was 69. So,
That is impressive.
yep. So, anyhow, any comments you got
Well,
take from last week?
one of the things that we've been concerned about over the last 2 or 3 years is injuries, and so I just wanted to go through the current injury list. And right at the top is our new running back, Isaiah Pacheco. He has a sprained MCL. Those aren't easy to recover from, but he's expected to be ready for week one against New Orleans. It's just a shame he's missing the camp and preseason because he's a new guy and he's got to get used to the offense. And so hopefully he'll get up to speed very quickly. Uh, we mentioned last week the real shame is Cade Mays, our free agent center, has a fractured wrist and he's going to miss a significant portion of the season. He's expected to return 8 to 10 weeks after the injury, which is near as I can tell, the earliest he would be back is the week after the bye week. The Lions have an early bye week this year, week 6, so he might be back for week 7. Giovanni Manu again is injured. He's been plagued with injuries. Juice Scruggs is supposed to. His injury is not supposed to be serious. Miles Kitzelman is on injured reserve with a leg injury. Anthony Ferkser is out for the season with a broken fibula. Good news is Tyler Conklin, had a calf injury, and he's been cleared off the PUP list and is active. And then the two outstanding safeties for the Lions, Brian Branch is expected to return late August or early September, and Kirby Joseph expected to be back early in the regular season. So Brian Branch will probably come off the PUP list. Kirby Joseph will probably stay on and miss the first 4 games. Derek Moore, I think you said will go at practice now, which is good news. Malcolm Rodriguez left practice for evaluation with an ankle. And Jimmy Rolder is questionable. He's expected back early September with a hamstring. And the rest of them, their injuries aren't serious enough to cause them to miss much more time. So always concerned about injuries where the Lions are concerned, because I really feel like it cost them a trip to the Super Bowl in 23, and it certainly didn't help them in 24 when they were 15-2.
Yeah, Bill, might have cost them 2 Super Bowl opportunities because they were so beat up, even though they were 15-2 when they lost to the Commanders 2 years ago. But that's a long list, and if you're a casual football fan, you might hear that and think, "Holy cow, not again!" But if you look across the NFL, every team, they've got 90 players in camp. Every team's going to have 10 or 15. And in fact, Bill, I was traveling a lot since I got back from traveling. I had a couple road trips the last few days. And that meant a lot of time to be getting updated on different Lions podcasts and information. And I was actually listening to the Kansas City Chiefs podcast, one of them. Their offensive line is absolutely beat up. Like they need to find players to field in this next game. So the thing we hear all the time, every NFL team's looking to strengthen their offensive line all the time. It's just so hard to have 5 good guys. But the Chiefs right now, they're in trouble with their offensive line, and that's just one other team. But right now, overall, the Lions are looking pretty good. Kate May's biggest pickup in the offseason from free agency, he will be back, as you said, likely game 7. I'm even hearing potentially game 5, but I agree with you. It'll likely be after the bye, game 7. Pacheco, you mentioned, likely back for the first game. Those are some key guys. You mentioned Scruggs. He's actually expected to start this Saturday as our center. And then you mentioned Conklin, he's back. Couple other, well, you mentioned Derek Moore. I'm excited, Bill, to see him on Saturday against the Commanders. Um, he's a bull. And then Vaki's back after having his nose broken. He's expected to start as the running back on Saturday. So, and Rodrigo, who was out again, he missed much of was it last year or the year before? Um, but apparently he's back and will likely play a lot Saturday. So, to me, the Lions are looking pretty good right now, and the fact that Kirby and Brian Branch, we should be getting them back, Branch for sure, sooner than later. That's all good news. So. Well, I want to talk, Bill, about those who are not injured and expected to be here. Looking ahead a little bit, we are getting close to the end of August when we're going to have that roster down to 53 players and then put 16 on the practice squad, and those 16 will be vulnerable to being poached. And so I want to start this, Bill, by saying the Detroit Lions have a really good problem in front of them. They have depth. You know, I remember watching a couple years ago when the Lions were featured in the um, Hard Knocks, and how Dan Campbell talked about how difficult it is to cut guys who are there busting their butt. And but this will be their hardest year because when you look at the roster right now, they are deep. So I went ahead and attempted to construct what their roster might look like. And keep in mind that roster's 53 players, the active roster. Three of them are special teams. You got a kicker, a punter, and a holder. Or, I'm sorry, long snapper rather. Kicker, punter, long snapper. So that leaves 50 players. Now, if you say that's 25 on the offense, 25 on the defense, I can barely get there to 25 on the offense without saying, oh man, I don't want to lose this guy. Defense, I could put 32 on there and say, man, here's seven guys I don't want to lose. That's a really good problem for the Lions. So that
Yes, it
all,
is.
Bill, that all leads to this, what's going on every day in practice. It's position battles. And you and I were talking about some of them beforehand. And then the game is that much more important because you look at the game against the Bengals, there's a couple guys who just lit up. Ahmed Hassanin maybe locked in his position on the roster. Jacob Sailors did a lot for himself. O'Neal, whose first name I'm not remembering, the rookie from Rutgers, he did a lot to make the squad and so on. So what are some of the position battles you're excited for?
Well, the one that I was looking at was the rookie Blake Miller. Uh, he was our first round draft pick last April. He is now the favorite to emerge as the starter at right tackle, uh, even though Larry Borum uh, was picked up as a free agent. He's still in the mix, but right now Miller is probably going to get the nod. And you mentioned um, Ahmad Hassanin and how he's looked, which would be surprised if he got the nod for starting, considering what they were expecting at the beginning of camp, because the position was thought to be DJ Wanham's. Uh, and he's still the favorite. But if Hassanin keeps up how he played against Cincinnati, how he's playing in camp, it might be a close call come the first game against New Orleans. Uh, he's just been outstanding uh, in the camp so far. So he's going to get playing time. Whether he's the starter or not is a different question. The real question now with Terry and Arnold gone, even though he was unreliable to a large degree, uh, they're going to have to make a decision as to who's going to be the starter opposite DJ Reed. It looks like Rock Ya-Sin is going to get the start this, did you say this week against Washington?
No,
And
I was implying he'll start first game against New Orleans.
okay. Well, Ennis Rakestraw uh, had been struggling, but I think he's improved in camp, and there were some thoughts he was going to have a hard time making the team, but things are looking up. And of course, injuries are still plaguing Brian Branson, Kirby Joseph. If we can get those guys back and healthy, that'll be a huge benefit. In the meantime, Avante Maddox and Chuck Clark are starting at safety in the interim. So there's a lot of pressure on these guys who are battling for positions, and some who are are given the positions because of injuries to step up and play well.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that edge position that it's been thought that Wanham would start opposite Hutch, but now Hassanin is putting the pressure on. But then there's another guy, Derek Moore. Again, he's had injury, but he's back and is expected to play Saturday. And I heard a little thing that in practice the other night, it was in a scrimmage the other night. He actually bull rushed Panay Sewell and knocked him off balance. And that's a rookie against an all-world tackle. And I mean, I think Moore is going to push Wanham as a starter. And then Lacey, they're very high on what he's done in camp. And they were talking about Hassanin maybe taking over Lacey as edge four, but you presented maybe um, he even pushes for edge two, and that's not out of the question. What excites me about this, you got Hutch, you got Wanham, you got Hassanin, you got Moore, you got Lacey. That's five guys who everyone at camp seems to be real enthused about. Whereas last year it was Hutch, just 1 year off a broken leg. It was Davenport, who they referred to as Davin Hurt, because he just was always hurt. Then it was Muhammad, who was a good pass rusher, but not a good run defender. And that was about it. So I feel like they went from scarce to loaded at the edge position. And then the cornerback position you talked about, I thought, wow, we're going to miss Terrion Arnold. I don't know if we are. Two guys that are just getting their praises sung are Nick Whiteside, who's, according to pretty much everyone's had the best camp so far this year, and the rookie Keith Abney. These are two guys. I think I'd take over Terrion Arnold and um, I don't know. Um, but I'd take either one of them, I think, over Terrion Arnold right now. So that room all of a sudden is looking good because they've also got, as you mentioned, Reed, Rock Ya-Sin. Um, they've got Roger McCreary, the free agent, who's very experienced, and Khalil Dorsey. So,
Well, one of the advantages, John, of having the multiple players that could play the edge is then they're able to go all out. Um, it's hard to go all out every play against NFL tackles and then get chipped by the running back. But if you have multiple guys that can uh, go in and out, give the starters a breather, you have a much better chance of being effective from the edge because A fresh second line player sometimes is better than a tired first line player. And that it's really encouraging to hear how many players are at the edge that can be counted on now as compared to last year.
Absolutely. And I'm feeling that way about cornerback, but let me tell you where else I'm starting to feel that. A position I was concerned about that now we have this good problem is linebacker. Because, we got maybe the best in the league in Jack Campbell. We've got potentially a solid one who hopefully takes a jump this year in Barnes. I think it's Derek Barnes from Purdue. Derek, or maybe you could double check that. You got Rodriguez, who's been a solid player for us. Nowatzki's been solid. But then they bring in Devin White, who was third in the league in tackles last year, who's a good run stopper. Then we got Jimmy Rolder, who, as we mentioned earlier, is injured, but he's going to be part of the mix as hopefully mid-season. Then we got a couple other guys, Clark and Reeder, I believe is his name, and a couple undrafted guys, and they're all putting the heat on at linebacker. So,
Well, you're right about Derek Barnes. That is very encouraging.
yeah, I think there's a good chance. And another thing, Bill, there's two things about the Lions I want to talk about here that traditionally they've played three linebackers, whereas a lot of teams play two linebackers and then a fifth defensive back called the nickel back. And it depends on down and yardage and that kind of thing. But the Lions last year, I believe, led the league in three linebacker set. This year at practice, they're seeing a lot more two linebackers. And let's say that's Campbell and White, both really good run stoppers. And then a nickelback, which, that could be Abney or Isian or Rakestraw or somebody else. So that's one thing. Secondly, most Lions fans know that Dan Campbell's really been committed to man-to-man defense with their cornerbacks. The difference is zone versus man-to-man. Man-to-man in the NFL is tough because you're going against such great receivers, whereas zone, you've got areas that you cover. Well, this year they're seeing more zone. So I think we're going to see some different looks and different things that match the personnel. And frankly, I'm glad to hear both those things. More two linebacker sets versus three, and more zone defense versus man to man.
Another thing that is encouraging to me is last year, Dan Campbell was very concerned about the lack of takeaways in the camp, in preseason games. The defense was just not generating turnovers. And Mike Payton, who's a Detroit Lions beat writer, wrote an article about this. And he pointed out that in 2024, the Lions were 11th in the league in takeaways. Last year, they went down to 20th. And he pointed out that the Chicago Bears were near the top of the league in turnovers, even though their defense was, by all other metrics, terrible. But you take the ball away, you can give up 40 yards if you, drive to start with. If you take the ball away, it doesn't matter. So the turnovers are huge. And Peyton said that this year he hasn't been at a practice that hasn't, where the defense hasn't generated turnovers. They got a turnover in the Cincinnati game. And, we both know that turnovers, they have a couple of aspects. One is luck. We saw that go against the Lions all the way back in 23, where the ball went through the defender's hands, hit him in the helmet, and ended up being a catch for San Francisco, first and goal. Uh, should have been a turnover, wasn't. Uh, Luck can create turnovers, how the ball bounces. Uh, you and I remember watching games last year where the opponent fumbled the ball 3 or 4 times, and every time the ball bounced right back up in their hands. So, but the other part of it is being in the right place at the right time, and the Lions just weren't doing that last year. But they seem to have righted that ship and are getting takeaways in camp and in the first preseason game. So we'll look for that hopefully to continue, because that's a big part of the game, both getting takeaways and preventing turnovers.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, I want to visit a couple more of the position battles. One that was talked about from the beginning and is still talked about is left guard. I think that's Christian Mahogany's to lose. And I think the fact that Cade Mays is hurt means Juice Scruggs goes to center and right now is not competing for left guard, but Ben Barch is. And he's a proven NFL player coming off injury. And so while I do think it's Mahogany's to lose, there's some pressure there. And then another one is fifth receiver. And you might think, well, that's going pretty deep here, John. But the significance of that is they've got a good pool of players to be looking at. And that fifth receiver tends to be a crucial special teams guy. So their first four receivers, obviously St. Brown and Jameson Williams. And then third is Isaac Tesla, who, by the way, people were all concerned, me too, that he had had a pretty bad camp and didn't play well against the Bengals. But every report this week is he's looking stellar. And I heard him interviewed, and he was kind of asked, "Well, are you concerned?" He goes, "No, I can catch the ball." Like he knows he can catch the football. And um, so anyhow, number four is Greg Dortch, who I'm very excited about to see what he brings to this Drew Petzing offense. They refer to him as a water bug, can move any direction very quickly. He's a guy that can catch the ball in stride and then just yards after catch, which is really being emphasized this year in the offense. But then that's four. So who's number five? Well, it could be a veteran Cedric Wilson who's having a good camp and he's a proven pass catcher. Or it could be Lovett, the second year guy out of Georgia who's good on special teams. Or it could be a lot of people said Tay Martin has overcome Lovett. Tay Martin was a former NFL guy that went to the UFL and came to the Lions this summer. He's been tearing it up. He had a great game against the Bengals. He's been tearing it up in practice. So these are battles that matter because, again, with depth and special teams, every one of these players matters. And if it comes down to deciding between two, some of these guys, they're looking at the finest edge they can see to make that decision.
Who's going to replace Khalif Raymond is of those guys?
That's Greg Dortch.
Greg Dortch, okay. Because
Dortch,
Raymond
without
came up
question.
with some Raymond last year came up with some huge catches, and he was great on special teams.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about that, he last year was receiver three. Tesla was receiver four. So in terms of receiver three, Tesla replaces him, but then Greg Dortch is a good receiver four and a returner. So Dortch is going to help on special teams. And I don't want to downplay the loss of Raymond. He was a great player and locker room guy for this team.
Well, and the thing is with the salary cap, these hard decisions have to be made every year. Um, You know, that's why we lost our running back Montgomery because just couldn't afford to pay him.
Right. So, Bill, as we look at this roster, like a guy I didn't even, you and I haven't mentioned in weeks is Peyton Turner, brought in during free agency. He was, I think, a first round draft pick back in the day, but has had a lot of injuries, but a potentially really good edge. He's out of the mix. He's not going to make the team. Um, Dan Skipper, last year's number 3 tackle, he's not as good as Larry Borum. He's now on the coaching staff. Giovanni Manu, last year's number 4 tackle, he's hurt. And by the way, his injury was non-football related and apparently happened before camp, and he didn't report it. And he's not going to be on this team anymore. He'll be gone. Anzalone, yeah, we're going to miss him, but a minute ago I talked about the depth of the linebacker room. And Cleve Raymond, we just talked about, I think he'll be replaced. And then Grant Stewart, I thought was a good linebacker backup last year. And another guy was Cunningham. I almost don't remember their names because I think we've got better players competing at all those spots this year for our depth. And better players at depth mean they're pushing the starters that much more. You always want to replace, you always want to be looking for every player's replacement. Who's better? Who could
Right.
be better? Well, Bill, anything else on the training camp or roster before we take a quick look at the upcoming game Saturday against the Commanders?
I'm looking forward to that. I expect to see a couple more starters playing. I don't know if Goff will play or not. Usually it's the game, uh, the last preseason game, the starters don't play. If they're going to play, it's this one. Uh, so I'm anxious to see if Goff is going to play, if Gibbs is going to play, if uh, Amon Ross St. Brown is going to play, some of the Hutchinson, Sewell, all of our potential all-pro players, are they going to be on the field or are they going to save them for the Saints?
Well, you and I haven't talked about this. Want to hear my answer?
Sure.
No, 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 no. Gibbs, no. Hutch, no. Goff, no. Sewell, no. Campbell, no. St. Brown, no. J-Mo, no. So why is that? Well, because our coaches know what all these guys bring. But who I think will play is every offensive starter except Sewell. Sewell maybe for one series. Um,
You mean offensive line starter?
yeah, what I say.
You said offensive starter. That would include all the guys you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
said no to.
Thank you for correcting that. Because I'd have gone back and listened to the replay and said, John, what the hell? Get it right. Uh, yeah, offensive line, maybe Sewell one series, but those guys, and the importance of that, these guys need the chemistry. They need to be working together. And, you made the comment that typically the last game, none of the starters play. And the main reason for that, Bill, is it's the final opportunity for your cutdowns to just make those final decisions. Is it this guy or this guy that's going to be running back number 4 or receiver number, 6 or so, yeah, that last game is going to finalize who gets cut and who doesn't. But this Commanders game, we got to get some of these starters in there, and I'm excited for that.
Well, the reason I say that some of them might play is because if you remember last year, none of the starters played, none of the real stars played the entire preseason, and then we laid a big fat egg against Green Bay, and it's just hard. to play the first game of the season against real competition for the first time, especially if the other team has played their starters, which I think Green Bay had. Uh, Now they might have laid an egg anyway, and if you play the starters and one of them gets hurt, you say, "Why did you do that?" Uh, but guys can get hurt first game of the season too. So
Yeah, and the
uh,
best example of that I know of was when the Jets brought in Aaron Rodgers a couple of years ago. The very first drive, I think, was the second play. He was hurting out for the season, first play of the regular season. So, yeah, you can't baby these guys. Um, there is so last year the biggest egg I think, or the egg that got laid was the offensive line was a mess, and that's why again I think this year they got to play all the starters, maybe not Sewell, or as I said, maybe for one series. And I do think with Goff Goff and Scruggs, assuming he's the starting center going into this regular season, they probably should have some series together um, because that's so important, the center to quarterback exchange and communication. So we might see some of that. We might see all these guys for a series or two just to get the rust off and be out there in pads and getting hit and being sore tomorrow. But if so, I doubt it'd be more than two series for the Stars.
yeah, probably not.
And I'm not concerned one way or another. As you said, if they're going to get hurt, they could get hurt anytime. They could get hurt when they go home at night. So I don't want to overdo that concern.
Well,
Well,
John, I'm looking forward to the regular season. We'd have two more preseason games to go. Washington, and then who's next after them?
Indianapolis,
So they're home against Washington. Is that correct?
they are. And
And then
Indy, I'm not sure.
I think we said they were away.
I think that's right. Hey, just a couple other things. Speaking of the Commanders, Craig Reynolds just got picked up as a free agent by the Commanders. So we're going to see Craig Reynolds, maybe not a lot because he just joined them a day or two ago. I really always liked Craig Reynolds as the Lions' number three running back. So he's now a Commander. Also, Taylor Decker. Still not signed by any team, and he's likely done with his career. I mean, months ago we talked about the LA Rams losing a tackle to an injury, and is Matthew Stafford going to say to um, Sean McVay, "Go get Taylor Decker, who blocked for me for years in Detroit"? Didn't happen. The Chiefs, as I said, they're
Of
beat
course,
up.
he got sacked a lot in Detroit, so maybe that's why they didn't make the call.
Good point. The left tackle's job is keep your quarterback from injury. Um, and then, I mentioned the Chiefs, their O-line being beat up. I wondered if they might give him a call, but my guess is Taylor Decker's done. And then the third interesting thing, we might have mentioned this last week, the Seahawks have shown interest in Terrion Arnold, but the latest I heard is the league has said, um, until they get more information on what's going on with Terrion's issues, he cannot practice or play. So that's all up in the air. And
Well, and that's a good decision.
yeah, for sure. One other guy, Bill, and all this talk of injuries, um, Makai Wingo hurt again. And honestly, I don't see him making the team. When I heard about him when he was picked in 2024, out of LSU. I really liked the pick. He's had a lot of injuries. He's a small D lineman, but everything I'm seeing, Skylar Gill Howard is similar size, but just a better player, very disruptive D line guy who I predict makes a 53-man roster. I think Wingo will be gone. Some other team will give him a try. but I wish him the best if that's the case. All right. Well, the Lions play Saturday at noon at Ford Field. You and I will be back on. Today is Wednesday. We're back into our rhythm. We'll be back on next Wednesday talking about the game with the Commanders, and we'll be at that point so close to the final cuts and the 53-man roster. The final cuts that it's not done in stages this year. It's all done and due the day after the final game. So I believe the date is August 31st. We're going to know who's on the Detroit Lions and who's on the practice squad.
Looking forward to game one.
Me too. All right. It's always good being on here with you, buddy. We'll be back next week to our listeners. Thank you.